Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Stores, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have somebody on who is an expert in an area that I've heard quite a bit about. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Hi, I'm Andrew Steiner. I'm an expert in meditation. I've been practicing some form of Buddhist contemplation for about 20 years now. And I've studied with teachers in Thailand and Japan and Nepal from a bunch of different traditions, as well as teachers here in the US who were just as insightful. Yeah, that's basically it.
That's fantastic. My understanding of meditation is that it is an ancient practice, and it's something that people have tried to connect with for years and years, whether it's where in the world. On some level, there was always some form of meditation, people trying to tap into that. I think it's really a restorative and effective way to try to practice that mindfulness and getting in touch with your understanding of yourself and understanding of the world and understanding like, oh, I can't necessarily take care of everybody or anything like that. But
Sure.
I think in the modern sense of it, and in a lot of instances where you're meditating with a lot of other people, especially if there's music, the subliminal messaging aspect of meditation has been really, really effective in helping promote advertising
Hmm.
and the ability to sell products to people as time has progressed. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of major corporations and brands have actually helped fund a lot of the app-based meditation products. And what they do is, if you've seen Josie and the Pussycats, the documentary film from 2000,
Okay.
one of the primary concepts in there is that they have the music and they have the subliminal messaging of like, oh, you need to buy these new products. And that was really effective when pop music was a little bit more prominent. But now you can't guarantee that people are going to be listening to the pop music as consistently. So that's why they've kind of shifted into the meditative space. And so you'll notice within 3 weeks of somebody downloading one of those meditative apps, that they've started buying more Coca-Cola. It might be Diet Coke in some instances, but they've started changing their brand loyalties in a lot of instances, just depending upon which one that they've signed up for. And I think that that's a beautiful thing that meditation has allowed us to do. And I think that another thing that a lot of people don't recognize about meditation's influence on our society is the idea of mantras, and how mantras were the first slogans that people kind of connected to throughout time. So like if you do have a mantra and you focus on that mantra, like a lot of people could say that just do it is a mantra in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And it's just like, oh, perfect. You take those mantras and you bring them into the populace so people don't realize that they're associating these things that could be restorative and helping them center themselves, but then it's, oh, we're attaching an item to it. I mean, I just think that the advertising and marketing that has been co-opted is maybe
Mhm.
not good but amazing. And then I think that there's a lot of different methods of meditation throughout different civilizations. So I think that you could even make an argument that going back to like the cave paintings that we had were a form of meditation, not necessarily the best artists or anything like that, but there are indicators of a ritual and the idea of being around a campfire and that kind of meditative focus on a campfire that I think everybody's kind of connected to. Even if you don't have that actual meditation practice, there's just like a little like natural inclination to when you're sitting around a campfire or you're out in the wilderness and you're alone with your own thoughts, you just kind of naturally go into a more meditative state. And I think that there's also something to be said about the meditative capabilities of somebody who is maybe unfocused, especially children that are unfocused in class that are doodling. I think that's a natural human desire to try and focus on something, to fiddle with something, and then be like, okay, I'm trying to focus on this other thing. Whereas if you could detach from that thing that is being dictated to you in that class and just doodle, you could get into a deeper sense of consciousness. And that would kind of be your method to get in there. I
Just doodle it, man.
just doodle it. Exactly. I sometimes talk about this. I watched the Ninja Turtle show,
Mhm.
and one of the episodes, this is one with the female Ninja Turtle that they introduced when they had the costumes. They had people in costumes,
Yeah.
and she is practiced in meditation, and she's trying to get all of the other Ninja Turtles to meditate, and they just can't do it. They can't connect to meditation, and then they start playing around and fooling around and like play fighting and stuff like that, and then she realizes, oh, this is their method of meditation, because they become so focused in that aspect of their training that they get close enough to the meditative state that she needs to connect them to progress the storyline. And I think that might not necessarily be how everybody is capable of meditating. I think that there is something to be said about like alternative forms and alternative methods to get into meditative states. Now, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say was accurate?
I'd say like 70%, maybe
Okay.
65.
Okay.
Passing.
That's pretty solid, I'd say. Tell me about meditation.
Sure. So, I mean, first, it's probably helpful to define meditation because depending on what religious or contemplative or spiritual tradition you're coming from, there's very different traditions of what meditation is to that group.
I
Like
see.
in a Jewish meditation, sometimes it's just conceptual, or you're reading a piece of scripture and you're contemplating that, and you're trying to do intellectual things and come up with commentary and or visualize numerology, and that's they do that in Tibetan Buddhism too.
Mm-hmm.
But in like Zen, there's a lot of emphasis placed on, it's kind of anti-intellectual in a way. It's kind of like transcending logic to break through to immediate experience. And what you were saying earlier about the advertising, like wanting to kind of use meditation to glom on to people's subconscious. I mean, I think that could definitely work, but also like real, to me, the mark of real meditation, like efficacy and
Mm-hmm.
progress, is making the subconscious conscious and kind of opening up your consciousness to parts of your psyche that were previously subconscious, and also kind of being more in the moment and aware of what's going on internally and externally and how the two are merging and intermingling.
I see. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and there is definitely some truth to the fact that corporations are using meditation, like mindfulness, as a way of upping productivity and people just pushing through boundaries that they should have about
Mm-hmm.
working too much. Just and so what I would want people to take away more than anything is that meditation is not about getting rid of thoughts or feelings. It is about eventually, maybe over the course of years or decades, or maybe immediately, getting to a very unforced state of peace and present awareness.
Yeah, kind
And
of piercing through the veil of that in a way.
yeah, like you're transcending emotion, but you're not obliviating ego and emotion. You're just transcending it. It's still there. It's still part of your consciousness. It's still part of who you are. If you want to, I mean, Buddhism would argue that you technically don't exist in a absolute sense,
Mm-hmm.
or that we're part of everything, and we kind of are made of a bunch of different perceptions and forms of consciousness that kind of as a whole come together as the illusion of self. But if there's an illusion of it, then to me it does exist in some sense.
Mm.
But then again, there comes the idea of like, what is the purpose of meditation, right?
Right.
So ideally it's making you more conscious and more present in your life, and it's like practicing mental skills that allow you to do that. But like you were saying with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like, okay, if their fighting is their form of meditation, then what are they precisely practicing for? I guess they're practicing to be very aware while they're in an actual fight. But I'm sure while they're in an actual fight, they're still trying to be more aware than they are at any given moment to give themselves an advantage and to stay in the fight and to keep. So I guess my point is, when is living not practice for living? I mean, life and practice for life is kind of the same thing to a
Hmm.
certain point. I mean, you're always alive even when you're practicing. So it's like, if you're fully aware while you're sitting on the cushion, practicing to be fully aware when you're not on the cushion, is that any less valuable than the moments that you're going to be fully aware off the cushion? Not necessarily. I mean, except for when you're, oh, well, there's also the idea that like you should put off enlightenment in the idea that you're going to help people reach enlightenment themselves.
Hmm.
That's a very like key part of Mahayana Buddhism, which is mostly practiced in like China, Taiwan, so somewhat in Tibet and
Hmm.
Japan. Like Zen Buddhism is kind of part of Mahayana, and their whole thing is the Bodhisattva vow, the vow that you're going to put all beings enlightenment, all their ending their suffering before your own transcending your own suffering,
I see.
which is kind of like an institutionalized martyr complex, I guess.
Yeah, I was very concerned about like the potential like codependent aspect of that, of like not putting your needs before other people's, and how that might, in the wrong hands, how that might be a difficult method to practice.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint a picture that Buddhism is this like is Buddhism is without negative, I guess, possibilities. There's definitely like Zen Buddhism was definitely used to push the war effort, the
Mhm.
kamikaze spirit in Japan, the whole die for your country, like you don't exist, just like that kind of Zen, militant Zen has been a
Mhm.
thing for a very long time. It's been used to glorify killing and also make more efficient killers. I mean, in a
Right.
sense. So there's that. But I do think there is a deep value to becoming more aware of your body. There's a deep value to becoming more aware of how emotions arise, how they affect your thoughts, how thoughts feedback and affect emotions, and how both phenomena are kind of impermanent and they do go away, they do pass, they're not solid. You're not defined by your thoughts. Like I remember being younger and just having like intrusive thoughts and like thinking like, oh, I'm a terrible person, I had a bad thought.
Right.
And it's just like, you know, thoughts do influence your actions. If you like kind of have the same negative thought over and over again, it will influence your actions, but you're not defined by your thought. And in the same way, a thought does not perfectly transcribe reality. It's a very like language cannot describe the infinite depth of any single point in the universe. That's why like poetry is a thing, because
Right.
using kind of creative language that doesn't make sense in a grammatical or like a it's not common usage, you get to break out of the normal descriptions and like kind of make you experience life in a different.
Absolutely. It's breaking those conventions and those established forms and regularities to connect you with an alternative view of something, or giving you an easier access to touch on your emotions or your frame of reference for this poem about a tree. For me, when I read a poem about a tree, I can think of being in a forest when I was a kid. But when my mom reads a poem about a tree, she just immediately thinks it's about me for some reason. But she has a problem where she thinks every poem that she reads is about me for some reason. But everybody can come at it from a different angle, because it does break that convention and does kind of break those standard methods that we've established in our brains. And I think meditation, from what you're describing, kind of does that same sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and especially when you have language that is unique and new and makes the brain be like, wait, what? Like the tree rained on my leaves or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your mind has to then redefine every one of those things in order to make it make sense. And that act of redefining kind of brings you into the present.
Absolutely. Andrew, this has been absolutely fascinating. If people wanted to learn more about you or learn more about meditation, what would you recommend that they look for? Where would you recommend that they go?
I have a YouTube channel, Andrew Steiner, and I'm launching a new one soon called Wanna Meditate, where
Hmm.
basically I have people on to talk about their spiritual past, and then we meditate together and talk about that experience. And I'd love
That's
to have
great.
you on sometime.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I'd love to do that.
And I'm also doing my show, my one-man show, How to Meditate, a burlesque show. Sometimes it's a two-person show. And I'm doing that in Glasgow in on March 21st and 23rd. So that'll
Oh,
be
that's great. That's fantastic.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you have a fantastic and insightful and restful day.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My name's Matt Stores, and this has been Mattsplaining.